Hello everyone, welcome back. Part 2 of Alice. Let's see where we go now. Now it seemed as if time passed too slowly for her liking, so Alice changed into riding clothes and hurried back to the stables. It was not uncommon for her to go to the stables, because horseback riding had been one of her passions throughout her life. However, the real reason for her love of horses was Landon. Okay, maybe that was not completely the truth. She did feel a bond of sorts with animals. At least animals understood her in a way that humans could not. Horses had no trouble allowing her to be free and run wild without any rules. There was a peacefulness that came over her with the wind on her face and her hair blowing behind her. Freedom. Once she got to the stables, she was annoyed to see the horses were not ready. "Landon!" she yelled. He came around the corner, his jaw set in annoyance. "Yes, Your Grace." "Why aren't you ready?" "Because you said 2 hours, and it's only been 1. "Well, I've changed my mind. I want to go now." He yelled out for one of the other stable hands to bring around the horses. Alice watched in dismay as he walked away from her. He did glance, though, however, over his shoulder. "I think Jim will be a better guide for you, since you're in such a rush, and I haven't eaten." Alice stomped her foot into the ground. "No, that is not an option. You will accompany me, or I will see you whipped in the courtyard." He stopped mid-stride. "Well then, I guess I better get cleaned up." Impatiently, she waited while he took his time getting ready. When he came back into view, she was surprised to see he was carrying a bag. When he noticed her stare, he shrugged. "You might be able to force me to go with you, but you're not going to force me to miss my meal." He strode toward the horses without waiting on anyone else. She would have had drawn and quartered. Instead, she took a deep breath and followed him. He could be infuriating at times, and yet her heart leapt to her throat at the thought of him being alone with her. When one of the other grooms tried to help her onto the horse, she shoved him away and jumped on by herself. Landon took off and she urged her horse to catch up. How dare he? Once they were beyond the castle walls, Alice slowed her horse to a steady trot. Landon heard the difference in her hoofbeats and reined in his mount. For the first time, he looked over his shoulder at her. It pissed her off that her breath caught the intensity of his gaze. He'd always been able to see through her, even when they were children. "Why are you like this?" she asked, as she eased her horse to be beside. A smirk crossed his handsome face. "Like what?" "I'm a princess. You can't treat me the way you do." He laughed. "You're no princess. You're a tyrant." Alice sucked in a breath. She watched his lips from a lazy, arrogant smile that he pulled. He knew he was pushing her patience. It was almost as if he took pleasure in it, the same as when he was a young boy. Pulling the reins, Alice brought her horse to a standstill. With ease, she jumped off the horse and started walking towards a trail in the woods. "You're just going to leave your horse out here?" Landon called after her. There was a little annoyance in his voice. Alice didn't bother to reply. She knew he would make sure their mounts were safely tethered. She knew he would look after them. He loved those horses more than he loved his own life. She needed to create some distance between them. The day was not going at all as she'd hoped. How could she bring things back around? Why did she desperately want him to see her as something other than a spoiled princess? And yet, whenever she opened her mouth, she acted exactly the way she knew he hated. It didn't take long for him to catch up with her. Without turning, Alice said, "You really don't like me, do you?" She could feel his presence. It was close enough that if she turned, they would be nearly touching. It was another thing stable hands were not supposed to do. Invade the space of royals. Even though she was warm from the heat of the sun, Alice, well, nearing so close to London, and it did have a strange effect on her, had a shiver. She could have any guy she wanted, but she wanted the one who despised her. No, I guess I don't much care for you, Alice. You're mean as a snake. You spread your venom around, infecting everyone you come into contact with. She hadn't expected him to be so honest. His words didn't really sting, at least not much, because she knew he spoke the truth. Her whole life had been living on the attack. Alice turned, tilting her head up. His eyes snapped to hers, and a muscle in his cheek twitched. It was useless to demand he take back his words, or even to threaten to punish him. For a long moment, they stared at each other. You know you're my only friend, Alice said, as she did, dropping her gaze. Why did she keep saying the things she was thinking? Landon's abrupt laugh turned into a frown. If I'm your only friend, you're in a sad state of affairs. I thought many things about you, Alice, but not that I thought of you as a friend. I know. Her voice was sad. She turned and continued down the narrow pathway. Cursing under his breath, Landon followed her. It had been a long time since Alice had returned to this particular area. She wasn't sure what led her to go there. The last time she visited was when she was about 12 years old, and she tried to run away. There was a portal nearby, with access to the dimension of Wonder Hills. But she never made it. Her mother's guards, well, they chased her. They did. All the way down. She'd been locked away for nearly 2 weeks in dungeon for disobeying the Red Queen. During that time, Alice learned to access her own magical powers. It quickly became apparent that she was equal in strength, if not stronger than her mother, and once she freed herself at the expense of several of the guards, Alice and her mother came to an agreement of sorts. The Queen would stay out of Alice's way, and Alice would remain in Wonderland and take her place on the throne once the Queen's lifetime was over. Life had been going rather smoothly until the Red Queen insisted that Alice marry someone from Wonder Hills before her 18th birthday, all because of that damn prophecy. It wasn't a bad pairing. In fact, the man that she was supposed to marry, I mean, he was gorgeous, but he wasn't London. It didn't make her stomach drop or her heart pound like a jackhammer. If anything, it bored her to tears. The idea of spending the rest of her life with someone like that, she did not want to find acceptable. However, the Queen was not open to discussion. Of course, Alice could flat out refuse, but a part of her was also worried about the prophecy. The oracle was seldom mistaken. The rustle of the tree branches brought Alice back into the moment. It was not that she'd forgotten London was nearby. She'd just gone into the quiet place in her mind, where she could think without being distracted. Half turning, Alice gave him a sidelong glance. I hope you brought enough food for the both of us. One of Landon's eyebrows lifted. I thought you went back to the castle to eat. I couldn't stand one more moment being cooped up in that dreaded castle. If you don't have enough food, I'll conjure my own. I've got plenty. Landon glanced around before moving towards a large boulder. He was tall enough to drop down on it. Alice had to hoist herself up. I never understood why you hated that castle so much, Landon said while opening his bag and pulling out sandwiches, fruits and such like. When I was a boy, I used to dream of living in a big old castle instead of the small one room. But I lived with my parents. Alice reached for an apple. Did you? It's funny how, no matter what we have in life, it always seems that, well, we're never satisfied. Speak for yourself. I'm quite content these days. Her head came around abruptly. It didn't surprise her to feel her stomach twist and jealousy rear its ugly head. Why's that? Have you met someone? Alice cringed at hearing the anger in her voice. Landon shot her a sceptical look. What gave you that idea? Can't I be happy on my own? Alice reached for a drink from his canteen in an attempt to regain her composure. I don't know. Is that possible? Oh, come on, Alice. It can't be that bad, living up on the hill with all those servants. You literally can have anything you want. It's right there at your command. No offence, but it's a little hard to feel any sympathy for you. I know your mother is a psycho, let's say, but you could rise above that. Nothing says you need to act like her. You could be nicer. It might surprise you to find that there are some decent people in this world. If you wanted, you could even leave this realm, go to another to live. Your past doesn't define you. As soon as she felt the tears well, Alice dropped the canteen and jumped to her feet, turning away from him. There was no way she was going to let London see her cry. Not now, not ever. I'm ready to go back now. She heard the shuffling and cleaning at lunch, and Alice blinked her eyes several times, pushing away the sadness that was coming down on her like a thick blanket. Please not now, she wanted to scream. Damn it. She hated when this happened. It usually came out of nowhere and she had no control over it. Closing her eyes, she tried to centre herself, but all she could see were the walls closing in on her. And that's part 2, guys. We will continue the story again in part 3 and see what happens next. Many blessings.